Now let's start with today's story. My name is James Smith, and my story, like so many others who wear the uniform, is one of pride, pain, and transformation. Growing up, I idolized my father, a man of few words but strong convictions. He was a soldier through and through, and I wanted nothing more than to follow in his footsteps. The stories he shared, those he could bear to tell, painted a picture of duty, sacrifice, and brotherhood. By the time I graduated high school, there was no doubt in my mind about what I wanted to do with my life. Joining the Army felt natural, like stepping into shoes that had always been waiting for me. I trained hard, pushed my limits, and eventually earned the coveted Ranger tab. The pride I felt when I completed that grueling training was indescribable. I was part of something bigger than myself, a tightly knit group of men and women who lived by the creed. Rangers lead the way. My deployment to Iraq was a blur of heat, dust, and adrenaline. Every mission demanded everything we had, and then some. We operated in conditions that tested not only our physical endurance but our mental strength. The friendships forged in those intense moments were unbreakable, cemented by shared hardships and victories. We counted on each other to survive, and that bond became my anchor in a world that often seemed chaotic. But war leaves its mark, and not everyone walks away unscathed. On what seemed like just another mission, everything changed. The IED blast came without warning, a sudden eruption that shattered the ground beneath us. I remember the searing pain, the ringing in my ears, and the chaos that followed. I was lucky, if you can call it that. The injuries I sustained meant my days as a ranger were over, but I was alive, and I had the chance to build a future beyond the battlefield. Retirement from the Army was bittersweet. I had lived and breathed that life for so long that stepping away felt like losing a part of myself, but I knew I had to move forward. The GI Bill became my lifeline, offering me a path to something new. I threw myself into my studies with the same determination that had carried me through Ranger training. Engineering caught my interest, the problem-solving, the innovation, the chance to create rather than destroy. It felt like a form of redemption. College wasn't easy. I was older than most of my classmates and carried experiences they couldn't begin to understand. But I found my groove, leaning on discipline and focus honed during my time in the military. Slowly but surely, I earned my degree and stepped into the world as an engineer. It was around this time that I met Susan Carter. She was working the front desk at an auto dealership when our paths crossed. I had come in to look at a truck. Nothing fancy, just something reliable. Susan caught my eye immediately. There was something about her, a warmth, a confidence, that made it impossible not to notice. She had this easy way of talking to people, making everyone feel seen and heard. It didn't take long for me to find excuses to come back, even when I didn't need anything for the truck. We got married a couple of years later, building a life filled with dreams and shared moments. My father passed away not long after our wedding, leaving behind his house and a life insurance policy worth $200,000. The house was valued at another $300,000, a generous inheritance that changed our circumstances. Susan and I decided to move into the house. At that time, I was working as a trainer for a local auto manufacturer. My job took me across the country, visiting service centers and conducting training sessions. It meant being on the road frequently. One sunny afternoon, I was returning home from one such training. As I drove into the city, familiar sights came into view. That's when I saw Susan's car. It caught me by surprise. She hadn't mentioned being out. I slowed down and followed her discreetly, curiosity and a tinge of unease swirling in my chest. She pulled into the parking lot of a motel. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I watched her park. My instincts told me something wasn't right. I inched closer, debating whether to confront her or wait. That's when a man stepped out of a nearby car. He walked confidently towards Susan, and together, they went inside. I was frozen, my heart pounding in my chest as I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. A wave of rage swept through me, raw and unforgiving. My first instinct was to storm inside and beat the guy senseless. But I knew where that would land me. In a jail cell, with my life unraveling even further. I forced myself to stay put, breathing hard, trying to rein in the chaos inside my head. Susan wasn't being forced into anything. There was no hesitation, no fear on her face, only certainty. She was there willingly, and that realization hit me harder than any punch I'd ever taken. I needed to know more. I had to understand why she was here, what this betrayal meant for the life we had built together. So, I waited, ignoring the nagging voice in my head urging me to confront her. Minutes dragged by, stretching into hours as I sat there, my thoughts bouncing between disbelief and anger. Finally, the door opened. They walked out together, side by side, laughing like there wasn't a care in the world. And then I saw it, that kiss. It wasn't a quick, guilty peck. It was long, passionate, the kind of kiss I thought was reserved for us. My stomach churned as I watched them pull away and head to their separate cars. I couldn't move, couldn't think. All I could do was sit there, a storm of emotions swirling inside me, as they drove off in opposite directions like nothing had ever happened. I drove home in a fog, my mind spinning with questions and scenarios I didn't want to believe were real. My jaw was clenched so tightly I could barely breathe through the knot in my chest. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I thought I had steeled myself, but seeing Susan waiting inside still sent a jolt through me. She was dressed like always, casual, effortlessly put together. There was nothing unusual about her demeanor. She smiled when she saw me, her eyes warm and familiar, as though nothing had changed. "Hey, you're back." She leaned in to give me a small peck on the cheek. "How was your trip?" "It was fine," I said flatly, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I just made some coffee. Want to join me?" she offered, motioning toward the kitchen. "Yeah, in a minute. I need to hit the bathroom first," I muttered, forcing a casual tone. I walked briskly down the hall, my pulse thundering in my ears. In the bathroom, I spotted her laundry in the corner, jeans and a simple blouse neatly folded. But when I picked them up, the faint but unmistakable scent hit me. It wasn't her perfume. It was a man's cologne, musky and sharp. My stomach twisted as the truth settled like lead in my gut. They hadn't just met for coffee. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the bitter bile of betrayal, and forced myself to change into fresh clothes. I had to keep my composure, at least for now. When I walked back to the kitchen, Susan was already sipping her coffee, her posture relaxed. I took a seat across from her and poured myself a cup, pretending to be interested in the swirling steam. "So," I began, my voice calm despite the tension in my chest. "What did you do today?" She smiled, completely unaware of the trap she was walking into. "Oh, the usual. Ran a couple of errands, got groceries, did some work on the computer. Nothing too exciting." I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. "That all?" "Yeah," she said, looking slightly puzzled. "Why?" I leaned forward, locking eyes with her, my voice colder now. "You missed the part where you were at the Golden Drive motel with the blonde man." Susan gasped, her eyes widening for a brief moment before narrowing with resignation. "So you saw me," she said flatly, without a hint of guilt or surprise. "Yeah," I confirmed, my voice hard as steel. "You and that man. In that room." I leaned closer, each word cutting through the air. "You cheated on me, Susan." She didn't flinch, didn't cry or apologize. Instead, she sighed as if relieved some burden had finally been lifted. "I knew someday you'd find out." Her calm demeanor made my skin crawl. "That's it?" I spat, incredulous. "You knew I'd find out, and it doesn't even bother you?" She folded her hands on the table, eyes steady. "His name is Jason," she said as though introducing me to an old friend. "My ex-boyfriend. I can't get over him." My jaw clenched, fists tightening on the edge of the table. "You can't get over him?" I echoed bitterly. "What the hell does that even mean?" "You married me, Susan." "We broke up when he left me for another girl," she said matter-of-factly, as if reciting ancient history. "But it's not romantic between us anymore." I laughed darkly, shaking my head in disbelief. "Oh, right. So, meeting at motels is just what? Catching up over coffee?" "No." Her voice was firm but disturbingly calm. "It's just sex. That's all it's ever been." I felt the ground shift beneath me, anger boiling in my chest. "Just sex?" I repeated bitterly. "You think that makes it better?" "He's still single," she continued, as if that detail mattered. "He works as an electrician at the local sawmill." I stared at her, completely numb, struggling to process the casual way she spoke about it. "A year ago," she went on, "you were on your way to the airport when Jason called." I swear, James, it was the first time I'd heard from him in ages. "I promise." Her promises felt like ash in my mouth. "He had a room at the motel and invited me over to talk," she said, her voice steady. I went. "Talk?" I snapped. "That what you're calling it now?" She ignored my outburst. "He asked about me. So, I told him everything. How we met, fell in love, got married. Then," she hesitated for the first time, her voice dropping just slightly, "we started having sex." I clenched my fist so tightly my knuckles went white. "How long?" I demanded, my voice dangerously low. "A year," she said bluntly, meeting my eyes without a trace of shame. "A year." I echoed, stunned. The realization shattered something inside me. My voice exploded. You've been cheating on me for the last 1 year? Susan's voice was disturbingly calm, as though we were discussing what to have for dinner. I've never given you sloppy seconds or anything like that, she said casually, as if that should somehow make it better. If you want, tonight I'll give you a BJ. I stared at her, stunned into silence. And I'll admit, she continued, completely oblivious to the rage simmering inside me, I like his rough way of having sex with me. But he's no threat to us, I promise. No threat? No threat? Who the hell was this woman? The person sitting in front of me wasn't the Susan I thought I knew. I felt like I was looking at a stranger, cold, detached, unapologetic, and she clearly had no idea who I was either. My voice was like ice, cutting through the tense air. I'm sorry you think cheating with Jason is something I can just forget about or put up with. But no, Susan. I leaned forward, my words sharp and deliberate. It does affect me. It affects our marriage. Her expression didn't waver, as though she were waiting for me to finish my little speech. I will not live with a cheater, I declared firmly. I'll sleep in the spare room tonight. And tomorrow, I'm seeing an attorney. Susan leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with an air of indifference. Well, she said coolly, let me explain what will happen if you file for a divorce. This is a no-fault state, she began with a smirk. You'll be forced to sell this house and split the money equally with me. Her eyes gleamed as she added, I know how much this place means to you. Your father gave you this house, didn't he? I clenched my fists under the table, my jaw tightening. The $200,000 in the bank? She continued smoothly. I'll take half of that too. The nerve of this woman. And since I don't work, you'll be paying me alimony. Might even get half of that big salary of yours. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a sickeningly sweet tone. What I do with Jason right now? That's not hurting you. My blood boiled, but she wasn't finished. But after the divorce? She grinned wickedly. You'll end up paying me while I keep having sex with Jason. It's a win-win for me, James, and all loss for you. So, you better think long and hard before you make a big mistake. I stood up without a word, my chest tight with rage and disbelief. The audacity. She wasn't just unrepentant. She was reveling in it. Susan barely glanced at me as I walked away, heading back into the kitchen, humming to herself like nothing had happened. I moved quickly, gathering my clothes for the next day and carrying them into the spare bedroom. My head was pounding, thoughts swirling in a chaotic mess. Once inside, I shut the door with a quiet but firm click. Then I locked it. Lying in the spare bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Sleep was impossible. Then I heard Susan's voice through the wall, low but clear enough to recognize. She was on the phone. Yeah, Jenny, he found out, she said, laughing softly. He was all serious and hurt. Like, what does he expect? Jason's just better in bed. My teeth clenched. That bitch Jenny knew too. I had invited her over for dinner just last month, clueless that she was probably in on this whole thing. I turned over, fuming. Not once during our conversation had Susan said she was sorry. Not once had she even suggested ending things with Jason. Her solution was for me to keep funding her lifestyle while she continued screwing him. As if I'd ever agree to that. If I accepted it, I'd be a cuck. That word burned in my head like acid. No way. Not going to happen. The next morning, I was up before dawn, my decision made. I grabbed my keys and drove to McDonald's, needing coffee and something hot to calm my nerves. The greasy breakfast sandwich didn't do much for my appetite, but at least I wasn't running on an empty stomach. By 9 a.m., I was at work, sitting stiffly at my desk. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the keypad. I made the call to an attorney's office. I need to make an appointment for today, I said bluntly. The receptionist scheduled me for 1 p.m. After hanging up, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Susan had been right, unfortunately. The attorney didn't sugarcoat it. In this state, he said, leaning forward with a sympathetic smile, you'll have to split the marital assets and likely pay alimony given her lack of employment. And since this is a no-fault state, infidelity won't affect the settlement. I clenched my jaw but nodded through the conversation, taking in every painful detail. When I walked out of that office, I knew Susan's smug little speech wasn't just taunting. It was the brutal truth. Back at work, I sat at my desk, staring blankly at email I had no interest in reading. I needed a plan. A way to get Susan out of my life without losing absolutely everything. The solution hit me like a jolt of caffeine. It wasn't perfect, it would hurt me, sure, but it would be worth it to get rid of her. I stood up, grabbed my phone, and headed straight for the boss's office. I I sat across from my boss, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. He leaned forward, his expression concerned but understanding. "You sure about this, James?" he asked. "You've been solid here for 5 years. Hate to see you go." "I appreciate that, sir," I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "But I've got to handle some personal stuff right now. It's not something I can balance with work." He nodded slowly, sighing. "Divorce is rough. Seen a few guys go through it here. Office assistant will help with your 401k. Doesn't sound like much, but it's yours." "Thanks," I muttered, feeling a bitter twist in my gut. A few minutes later, the assistant handed me the paperwork to withdraw my funds. 5 years of effort boiled down to a pathetic sum, but it was something. The boss, ever decent, handed me my last paycheck in cash. "Take care, James," he said, patting me on the back. "You'll land on your feet." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Thanks for everything." Next stop, the bank. I strode in with purpose, determined to secure my future before Susan could ruin it. "How can I help you today?" the teller asked politely. "I need to withdraw from my savings account," I said, sliding my ID across the counter. "The full balance." Her eyes widened slightly. "That's a substantial amount, sir." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I confirmed. After some verification, she handed over the withdrawal slip for me to sign. Moments later, I had $200,000 in my possession, cash, in neatly bundled stacks. Susan would never know. The account had always been in my name, untouched since I started saving. The next morning, I went straight to the mortgage office, every step calculated. "I need a $300,000 mortgage on my property," I told the banker. She raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Let's look at your eligibility." The paperwork took time, but by the end of the meeting, I had secured the loan. Since the house was solely under my name, there was no legal requirement for Susan to sign or even be notified. She would never know. I drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel, every second feeling like it was pulling me deeper into the web I was weaving. The mortgage money was with me now, all in cash. As I parked in the driveway, I felt a sick sense of control wash over me. Inside the house, Susan had no idea what I was doing. I'd been living in the spare bedroom for days, locking the door each night, shutting myself off from everything. I had a plan, and I wasn't going to let anything, or anyone, distract me. The next morning, I made a phone call that I knew would set things in motion. Javier Mendez, a name I hadn't mentioned in years, but someone who could help me in ways I never thought I'd turn to. I knew Javier from my time in the army. We were both there, both part of that IED explosion in Iraq. It left scars on both of us, in different ways. I got out and built a life as an engineer, but Javier, well, his path was darker. He'd slipped into the world of organized crime, trafficking drugs, pulling jobs that made him feared. I never saw him as a mobster back then, but that's who he had become. That evening, I walked into the bar where I knew he'd be. The place smelled of stale beer and desperation, the kind of place no one goes unless they're looking for something. Javier's men were scattered around, their eyes sharp, watching everyone who entered. I moved through the crowd, my heart pounding in my chest. When I saw him, sitting in the corner, my breath caught. He was older, harder now, but still the guy I knew. My buddy from the army. His eyes locked on me. His men stepped forward, but with one quick glance, Javier waved them back. He got up from the table, his arms wide, and before I knew it, he was pulling me into a hug. "James," he exclaimed, his voice booming in the bar. "It's been too long, man." I told him everything. The anger I'd been bottling up poured out, raw and unfiltered as I explained how Susan had been seeing a man named Jason, working at the local mill. I could feel the tension in the air as I spoke, knowing I was walking down a dangerous path, but at this point, I didn't care. I just needed it all to end. Javier didn't interrupt me, just listened with a cold, calculating expression on his face. After a long silence, he raised his hand to stop me. "Say no more," he said, his voice calm but firm. "This Friday, I'll take care of things." His words sent a shiver down my spine, but I tried to keep my composure. "What will you do to him?" I asked, though I already had an inkling. He smiled, a dark, knowing grin that sent a chill down my back. "I'll let him decide his fate," he said, his tone almost like he was savoring the thought. I swallowed, my mind racing, but I didn't argue. Javier wasn't someone you questioned. He leaned back in his chair, taking a long drag from his cigarette before asking, "So, where are you headed next?" I paused. I hadn't even thought that far ahead. "I don't know yet," I replied. Javier nodded like he was expecting that answer. He pulled out his phone and made a few quick calls, his voice low and sharp as he arranged something. When he hung up, he looked at me. Thursday, you board a flight to Mexico. You'll pick up a new passport at the airport. I've got a guy who'll hook you up with everything you need. A new identity, a fresh start. But it'll cost you, he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. 50 grand. I'll pay the Mexican officials and cover the tickets, but you'll need to pay me up front. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the cash. I had more than enough, and at this point, it felt like my only option. I handed it over to him without hesitation. Javier pocketed the money, counting it briefly before slipping it into his jacket. He gave me a nod of approval. Good. You're set. Get to the airport Thursday. The rest is handled. I stood up, feeling a strange mixture of relief and dread. The path I was choosing was irreversible, but it was the only way out of this mess. I thanked him, keeping my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside. Javier gave me a small, almost amused nod. Don't thank me yet, James. We'll see how things go. With that, I turned and left, stepping back into the world I was about to abandon for good. I woke up to the soft light streaming through the windows. As I got up, I could feel it in my bones. Today would be the day I had to face Susan. I found her sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. She was already waiting for me, as if she knew this moment was coming. There was no way out now, no more avoiding it. I stepped into the kitchen and started making myself a cup of coffee, trying to keep my movements slow and controlled, not letting my anger boil over just yet. I sat down across from her with my cup in hand, taking a sip to steady myself. Her eyes were on me, waiting for something. An apology, an explanation, maybe just a reaction. You didn't make me a cup, she said, her voice soft, almost playful, like she was trying to turn this into some normal conversation. I smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant one. There are a lot of things that you did without me. Why not get used to this? Her eyes flickered, and she leaned forward a little, her tone more serious. I told you, Jason and I aren't taking away anything from you. I'm still your wife. You always wanted a family, right? When the time comes, I'll make sure only you become the father. I'll give you everything you want. This was her trying to justify what she had done, trying to convince me it was all just some side thing, nothing that should affect us. But it did affect me. It affected everything. I leaned back in my chair, staring at her for a moment, trying to keep my cool. I want a faithful wife. Can you give that to me? She sighed, like she was already bored with this conversation. Come on, James, don't be stubborn. I love only you. Jason is just a means to satisfy some of my certain desires. I interrupted her, my voice sharp. Desires that your husband cannot fulfill? She looked at me like I was being ridiculous. No, it's just different with him. You're gentle. He's rough. I felt the anger rising in me, but I kept my voice steady, though it was hard. So, you like to be used as a street hooker? Should have told me earlier. I would have made some money from it. She stared at me, shocked for a moment, and then her face turned red. Shut up, James. I am no hooker. She screamed, her voice full of outrage. Well, you are getting screwed by men in cheap motels. Hookers do that all the time. You have James right now. Maybe in a few months, you find Chad, then Tyrone, then maybe someone else. Maybe then some other desires emerge inside you, and you to screw someone else. You are still young. People will pay good money for another 4 or 5 years. Then they will move to a much younger option. You might as well start now if you want a career from it. My words were dipped in venom. She was frustrated and got up. Don't blame me when I wreck you in court. I finished my coffee and said, I wish you all the best. I will not blame you for anything. Now, before I leave for the day, I'd just like to tell you that I used to love you. I used to think I am the luckiest man on earth. I used to think we were made for each other. But Susan, the problem is, I used to. You made sure of it. Then I left the house. That night I walked back into the house. I saw a note on the kitchen table. It said, since you were so disrespectful in the morning, I decided that I will spend the night having sex with James. If you mind, to hell with you. I will continue with my arrangement no matter what you say. If you want to divorce me, be my guest. Your loving wife, Susan. The signature to the letter, your loving wife, Susan. It was very ironic that a loving wife was letting her dear husband know that she had gone out to cheat in him. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was rubbing my face in it. She thought she could control this situation, that she could break me, but all she did was show how far she'd fallen. If you mind, to hell with you. She was already so far gone, so deep into her mess, that she didn't even care how it would end for either of us. By the time the sun started rising, I called a cab. My car was already sold, and by the time Susan came back, she'd find nothing but the empty house. Not a car in the driveway. Not a trace of me. No clue where I'd gone. No way to follow me. The cab ride to the airport felt surreal. It felt like I was walking away from a nightmare. I stepped out of the cab and glanced at the terminal ahead. I felt a strange peace settling over me as I walked through the doors, my mind finally quieting. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this was the end of that chapter. Susan had made her choice, but she would never know what happened and how it happened. I boarded the flight, and when I landed in Mexico, everything felt like it was happening too fast, too surreal. I had no idea what would come next, but I was already too far gone to turn back. I followed the instructions I'd been given, and soon enough, I met the immigration officer who was supposed to take care of everything. He didn't say much, just motioned for me to follow him into the men's washroom. There, he handed me a new passport, no questions asked, no hesitation. My new name was Alistair. The officer also handed me a plane ticket to Thailand and a small file, and gave me a quick smile. All the best, he said, then added, you'll meet Bunya outside the airport. He'll help you. I didn't know who Bunya was, but I didn't need to. I was on my way, and that was all that mattered. The next thing I knew, I was boarding another flight to Bangkok. The hours stretched on, my body aching from the long journey. I hadn't slept much, too wrapped up in my own thoughts. But when I finally landed in Thailand, I spotted a round, chubby guy waiting for me. His name was Bunya. Alistair? He asked in broken English, a big grin on his face as he shook my hand. Yeah, that's me, I replied, shaking his hand. He chuckled, clearly happy to see me. Come, I take you to hotel. We got into a cab, and after a short ride, we arrived at a local Hyatt hotel. It wasn't the most luxurious place, but it was comfortable, and at that moment, it felt like exactly what I needed. Don't worry, Bunya said with a smile. Tomorrow, I find you house. You can stay here tonight. I nodded, grateful. Thanks. I appreciate it. The next morning, true to his word, Bunya had everything lined up. We went to see a small house near the beach, a place that felt like it could be a fresh start. I liked it instantly. It wasn't big, but it was mine. This good house, Bunya said. You buy? I didn't need to think twice. I nodded. Yeah, I'll take it. By the afternoon, the house was mine. I couldn't believe how quickly everything had fallen into place. It was like I had stepped into a new life without a second thought. The file contained all my qualifications, but under the name of Alistair Williams. Then, Bunya helped me find a job as a head trainer with an automobile company. It wasn't exactly what I was used to, but it paid well, and I didn't care. It felt like the perfect way to start over. As I stood there, looking out at the beach from my new place, everything seemed to make sense. Javier had been right. He had promised me a new start, and here I was, already living it. I smiled to myself, thinking of Susan. She would never know what happened. 2 days after I settled into my new life, I got a call from Javier. The phone rang, and the moment I saw his name on the screen, I couldn't help but feel a chill run through me. It was like I knew what was coming. Alistair, Javier's voice came through the line, low and steady. You wanted to know what happened to Loverboy. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding in my chest. Yeah, what happened? You took care of it, right? Javier paused for a moment, and I could hear the faint sound of someone moving in the background. He's gone, buddy. My boys took him across the border into Mexico. You weren't the only one who wanted him gone. I knew of 2 more husbands who wanted him gone. I gripped the phone tighter, my throat dry. What happened to him? Javier's voice stayed cold, matter of fact. They beat him, made sure he wouldn't be a problem anymore. But that's not all. They gave him a choice. 2 bottles, one with vodka, the other with water. Both looked the same. Stupid guy. Chose the vodka. What do you mean? Did he not see? Javier sighed, like he was reliving it in his mind. They didn't tell him. He never knew what he was drinking, James. He took the vodka, and then they pushed him out into the Sonoran Desert, about 100 miles from the nearest settlement. It was over 110 degrees. July heat. No water. You can guess what happened next. I felt a knot form in my stomach. The image of Jason, stranded in the desert with nothing but his choices haunting me, made me sick. Jesus, so what now? Javier's voice softened, almost as if he was savoring the final part. His body was found this morning. His stomach was full of vodka. He didn't make it. I sat there, the weight of the words pressing down on me. I didn't know if I should feel relief or something else. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part of me felt something else. Something darker, like the end of something I didn't fully understand. Thanks, I said, my voice tight, unsure if I meant it. Javier was quiet for a moment before he responded, his voice turning hard again. Don't forget why you're here, Alistair. They pushed you out, buddy. Don't feel bad for them. I didn't answer right away. What could I say? I wasn't going back. Not to that life. Not to Susan. I was done. But I couldn't shake the image of Jason's last moments, the hot desert sun, and that bottle in his hand. His stomach full of vodka. Damn, that would be a nightmare. Now let's check the story from Susan's side. I had been waiting for 3 days, not knowing where James had gone. The only good part was that I called Jason for a nice afternoon. We had some wild sex in my bed. But now I was missing James. The house felt colder without him, emptier somehow. I tried calling him again, but it went straight to voicemail. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was like he had just disappeared. Jenny called me the second day, noticing how restless I was. She could hear it in my voice. I told her I hadn't heard from James, that I had no idea where he was. Her tone shifted quickly, as if she knew I wasn't being completely honest. You should call the cops, she said, her voice sharp. I hesitated, gripping the phone tight. What would the cops think of me? I can't. It's just complicated. He'll come back. Jenny let out a frustrated sigh. You're still worried about what people think. Seriously? You should have listened to me when I told you not to get involved with Jason. But now, you deal with it. Her words stung, but I couldn't blame her. She was right. I had made this mess, and now I was stuck in it. Still, I kept convincing myself James would come back, that he'd forgive me. I didn't know why I thought that. I just kept holding on to the hope. The next day, I had to run out to the store. I grabbed my purse and James's ATM card, the one he had given me for emergencies. It had always been there when I needed it, a safety net. But when I slid the card into the ATM, the screen flashed back at me. No money. I frowned, tapping it again, thinking it was a mistake. But it was the same thing. I pulled the card out and went to the bank right away, my heart pounding in my chest. The bank manager greeted me, his face tight when he saw me. I could tell something wasn't right, but I didn't know how bad it was yet. I asked him if there was a problem with the card. He checked the system and then looked up at me, his expression unreadable. I'm afraid the account is empty, ma'am, he said slowly, as if he was trying to soften the blow. There's no money left in the account. I felt like the ground was slipping out from under me. What? How? That's impossible. I managed to choke out, desperate for some kind of explanation. He cleared his throat, his voice matter of fact. But you just took the money from the mortgage. Full amount of the house. I stared at him, stunned, unable to process the words. My mind went blank. What do you mean, the house is mortgaged? Why didn't James tell me about any of this? The manager's tone softened slightly, but his message didn't change. He did. Ma'am, the house is mortgaged. If you don't have money, you'll need to vacate the premises. My chest tightened, and I felt the walls closing in on me. Pay? I don't have that kind of money. I couldn't even think straight. How had I not seen this coming? The manager gave me a small, sympathetic nod. I'm sorry, ma'am, but the bank won't wait beyond the timelines. You need to decide, pay or vacate the house. I felt the blood drain from my face. Everything was falling apart. I had no idea what to do now. I tried calling Jason again, hoping, praying that this time he'd pick up. But his phone went straight to voicemail, just like James's. I didn't know what to do. I felt completely lost, empty. I had made such a mess of everything, and now I had no one to turn to. The next morning, I couldn't stand the silence of the house anymore. I needed to do something. I had to find James. I had to fix this, but I knew deep down that I was running out of time. I couldn't stay like this forever. I finally decided to go to the police. I walked in, the air thick with the weight of my guilt. I told them everything, about how I had cheated on James with Jason, about the note I left, about my affair. As I spoke, I could feel the eyes of the officers on me, their judgment plain as day. They didn't need to say it aloud. I could see it in their expressions. Ma'am, we'll look into this, one officer said, his voice flat and professional. But if you're expecting sympathy, I suggest you try somewhere else. I knew they didn't believe me, that they saw me as the problem. I could feel it in the air, thick with their disdain. They took my formal complaint, but it didn't feel like anything had changed. 3 weeks passed, and nothing. No word on James, no sign of Jason. It was like they had vanished from my life completely. I didn't call Jenny. She would just lecture me, tell me what an idiot I was for everything that had happened. I already knew that. I didn't need her to remind me. By the 4th week, the weight of it all was unbearable. I needed to find something, anything, to hold on to. So, I found a job at a local bar. It was a far cry from the life I had imagined for myself, but at least it was something. I'd have my own money, my own independence. But when I walked into that bar for my first shift, the reality hit me hard. The men there were crude, obnoxious, and the way they looked at me made me feel so small. It was like they saw nothing but a body to ogle at, nothing more. I hated it. I hated the way they treated me, the way I felt like I had no dignity left. But as much as I wanted to walk out of there, I couldn't. I needed the money. I had no other choice. So, I put on a smile, forced myself to serve the drinks and take their orders, all the while trying to block out the sickening feeling in my stomach. What had my life come to? 2 months passed, and everything I had worked for, everything I had built, was gone. I could not pay for the mortgage. The house was sold, the money barely enough to get me a tiny room with just a kitchen and a bathroom. I would sit in that small space at night, staring at the walls, listening to the silence, and I couldn't stop the tears. I cried so much during those nights. I knew I had messed up. I had ruined everything. I had betrayed James. If only I had shared my desires with him. If only I had been honest, instead of turning to Jason. Maybe things wouldn't have fallen apart. Maybe I wouldn't have lost everything that mattered. The humiliation at work was unbearable. Every day felt like an assault on my dignity. The way the men looked at me, the crude comments, they made me feel small, like I was nothing more than an object. I tried to hold it together, to push through it, but each day chipped away at me a little more. I didn't know how much longer I could take it. I kept thinking, maybe this is how it was supposed to be. Maybe I deserved this pain. There were nights when I just wanted to end it all. I thought about what it would be like to just disappear, to stop the constant ache in my chest, the shame, the guilt. What was the point of going on when I had ruined everything? I had no one left to turn to. No friends, no family, no one who cared. I was alone in the mess I had created. I couldn't keep going like this. I just couldn't. Now let's check from James's side. 3 months had passed, and I was finding my rhythm again. The routine was simple. Work hard during the day, train kickboxing in the evenings. It was a hell of a way to forget the pain that had built up inside me over the months. But then, pain came from a different direction when Javier called. "Alistair, I got some news for you," he said, his voice more serious than usual. I braced myself. Javier wasn't one to call for small talk. "Susan's gone," he said flatly. "The cops found her in the morning at her apartment. Overdosed. Some say it was on purpose." My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. A cold tear traced down my cheek before I could stop it. It was strange. Part of me wanted to feel relief, but there was this gnawing pit in my stomach. A feeling that somehow, I was still tied to her, despite everything. They cremated her. No one was there to claim her body. Javier continued, his tone softer now. "Just stay strong, brother. Stay strong." I didn't respond. I couldn't. What was there to say? I lay down on my bed afterward, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the news. It all felt distant, like watching someone else's life unfold. A part of me wondered, what if Susan had been open with me? What if things had been different? But there were no more what ifs. Everything had ended. James didn't exist anymore. I was Alistair now, and I would live. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.